The rivalry is back on.
Welcome back to another episode of the Bring the Juice podcast. I'm your host, co-host, as always, Cody Felger. Joining me, as always, Derek Larger. Derek, free agency is coming quickly, man. We're just about a week out. How are you feeling?
Oh, man, the nerves are getting to me, man. I'm really wanting this thing to get going. We're less than a week until legal tampering starts, which in and of itself is very exciting. Just can't wait to see what the Colts do this year, because we all kind of expect them to maybe turn up the heat a little bit more this year with the amount of cap space they need to spend. So I can't wait, man. It's going to be a fun time.
Yeah, again, free agency starts next week. So that would be March 18th, Wednesday, March 18th. Free agency officially opens. But like you mentioned, Derek, there's legal tampering, which means they can start talking to players. Teams and players can start talking. And that goes 2 days before, I believe. So that's a Monday. Monday, legal tampering starts. Really, it's kind of like free agency starts on Monday, because you hear a lot of these deals being made before we even reach Wednesday. And so next week is really just a crazy week in the NFL. After really just a long off season of not a whole lot going on. Normally, it seems like the Colts off seasons are kind of crazy in some in some respects. I mean, last off season was pretty good up until obviously Andrew Luck retiring. I wouldn't really count that as the off season. Their off season was pretty quiet,
right?
But obviously Josh McDaniels and just Edwin Jackson, all that stuff happening. This is maybe one of the first off seasons that Chris Ballard really, it's really quiet amongst the Colts organization. There's been a few reports of different, players that the Colts are choosing, reportedly to work on deals with, which we'll get to, and also some guys that they are probably not going to bring back. They're going to let test free agency. And so I thought, in honor of free agency being next week, we could look at the Colts unrestricted, restricted free agents, and also some exclusive rights free agents. There are only a couple of those. And so I thought we could start first with the unrestricted free agents, go into the restricted free agents, and then go into the last category, which I just mentioned, the exclusive rights free agents. And so we'll start there with the unrestricted free agents. And I'll kind of explain what each one of them means. So basically, what an unrestricted free agent is a player whose contract has expired and has 4 or more tenured years in the league, and they may sign with any other team with no restrictions. So there's no restrictions here. If the Colts don't choose to re-sign them, they're free to explore any other options. And there's 12 of these guys right now as it stands. But one of those guys that we can kind of talk about right up front, who we fully expect to be back and re-signed with the Colts, is Anthony Castonzo. And, this will be his 10th year in the league. He's played 9 seasons with the Colts. And, he was one of the best graded offensive tackles last year in the NFL. We obviously have known throughout his career, he's been an elite run blocker, but he's gotten even better at pass blocking. He actually made the Pro Bowl. He was a Pro Bowl alternate for the first time in his career this last season in 2019. And, there had been some reports, and Castonzo had told reporters that he was going to take some time and consider potentially retiring from the league. He's not that old of a player as well, similar to Andrew Luck. I think that kind of gave some Colts fans some Andrew Luck PTSD a little bit. But Castonzo announced a couple weeks ago that he intends on playing in 2019, and he's going to kind of take it year by year and see what happens from there, according to GM Chris Ballard. And so we can kind of talk about Castonzo first, because he is the biggest free agent. He's the only one as of now that we know most likely 99.9% sure he's going to be in a Colts uniform in 2019. So, Derek, how big of a move is Castonzo? We've talked about him. We've harped on him on this podcast time and time again. How big of a domino is it that Castonzo is deciding to come back for 2019?
Oh, it's huge, because like I mentioned before, it gives Chris Ballard an extra year to really plan out his approach to the quarterback situation and then dealing with the left tackle. It just gives Ballard and this staff a little bit more time to just organize a strategy. And I can't wait to hear what that contract is for Castonzo. Kind of surprised that it's taken him this long to figure it out, but at least we do know he is coming back. And it's really nice to know that your left tackle, who was pretty much the third best left tackle in all of football last year, is going to be back for one more year to help solidify that offensive line. And it just, like I said, opens up multiple different kinds of possibilities for Ballard to take advantage of. So that way they don't have to waste that 13th pick on a left tackle and rather spend it on something more important at the moment.
Right. And it kind of gives Chris Ballard, I guess, more of a window to explore finding that left tackle of the future as well. And I think that's huge because, it would just be wild to think you lose your starting quarterback and then you lose your left tackle in back-to-back seasons. Like, that's just unheard of. And so getting Costanzo back is a huge, huge domino for what you want to do, maybe at the quarterback position, at some other positions of need. And also it gives you kind of a window now to address that left tackle position and start grooming somebody to potentially take over when Costanzo, whatever contract extension he does sign, whenever he does indeed hang it up, you have a guy waiting in the wings there that can take over that left tackle position. And so it's obviously a huge thing for the Colts moving forward. On the flip side, I kind of want to talk about another guy who most likely will not re-sign with the Colts. I mean, Chris Ballard was pretty candid that they probably won't be exploring a contract extension with Eric Ebron, the tight end. He was with the Colts for 2 years. He played this last year in 11 games. He only caught 31 passes for 375 yards and 3 touchdowns. And he was actually placed on injured reserve on November 25th. He had some apparent ankle injuries. But, he's a Pro Bowler back in 2018 with Andrew Luck. But it just kind of seemed like, obviously, there was a downgrade from Andrew Luck to Jacoby Brissett. And Ebron, there was just kind of moments, I think, last year that you saw. And I know that there's surprisingly a lot of people who still defend Eric Ebron. But just based off of Chris Ballard's comments and what he said at his end of the year press conference, kind of seemed like Eric Ebron rubbed him the wrong way and Colts management the wrong way with how he handled this season, and kind of just talking about how I don't know, it just kind of gave me a vibe that Eric Ebron probably kind of copped out on his teammates a little bit and kind of just hung it up early and didn't really fight through some of those injuries like he would have if he had an Andrew Luck last year. And so it was just, it's probably best for both parties to kind of, go their separate ways. So no hard feelings towards Eric Ebron, it just didn't work out. And so the Colts are obviously going to have to address that position, the tight end position in the draft. And potentially in free agency as well, Derek. There are some guys I know we've talked about, Austin Hooper, Hunter Henry. But what kind of domino does this leave, knowing that Eric Ebron, a red zone threat, is probably not going to come back to Indianapolis in 2019?
Yeah, like you said, it certainly is another receiving threat gone, and pretty efficient one inside the red zone, no doubt about that. Especially when you don't know what quarterback you're going to have, you can use all the receiving help you can get. But, again, it just leaves more options on the table for some of these younger guys who are going to get some time to play. Or, if we draft a tight end later on in this draft, which I think is perfectly plausible that we'll do. So like you said, you pretty much said everything about Eric Ebron that you need to know. Just very talented player, just didn't handle the situation very well here in Indianapolis this last year. And that's why it looks like he's not going to be here for very long.
Yeah, speaking of a guy that's been here for a long time, Clayton Geathers, who's set to hit free agency again. He was a free agent last year, signed a 1-year deal. He was a defensive captain this last year, but then he got actually benched when Khari Willis really just came onto the scene and was fantastic as a rookie at that strong safety position. And so, he finished 48 tackles. He actually had his first career interception, which I think is absolutely wild.
Right.
But, it's kind of like, the injury history that he's had, along with the fact that I think because of that injury history, he's not as effective as a player as he was when he was younger. And, the Colts just have some better options right now. Certainly if you do re-sign Geathers, though, it's definitely would be a team-friendly deal type thing. Would you re-sign Geathers, Derek, if you had the choice, and why or why not?
Well, I mean, I did like his contract last year when they brought him back for basically a veteran's minimum, if you want to call it that, which is around $2 million. It's they kind of knew that the direction they wanted to head in. They knew they were going to try and get something else in the draft. I think that's one thing I'm going to look at closely is that whoever they re-sign, I'm going to look at these contracts, or who they don't re-sign. I'm going to be able to assess whether or not that's going to have something to do with their draft. But Clayton Gathers, it's not always about what he brings to the field. It's ultimately the leadership and what a guy brings to the locker room that has helped. I mean, that's why Chris Ballard said this locker room that we have right now is ready for a big name free agent. It's because of guys like Darius Leonard and Clayton Gathers and those other big name guys that are there every day, that are role model teammates, role model citizens, and they are the guys that show up every day and do their job. Clayton Gathers, like we said, is a guy that's on the back end of his career. He's not going to give you a lot of time, and he's certainly not going to make the big play for you, obviously, but it is a guy that, you'd like to have around the locker room, especially somewhere at this stage of when your team is still trying to get where it wants to be. So if Ballard can get him a contract similar to such, or maybe a little bit lower, because now we know that Kahari Willis is pretty much going to be the starter. If we can get, Clayton for $2 million or under, then I would be perfectly fine with saying, be a backup, help be the role model in this locker room, and I'm happy with that.
And Chris Ballard was quoted in his press conference saying, we did not have enough veteran leadership in the locker room last year. So got to factor that in. Is that something that Chris Ballard really he values that much that he'd bring back a guy like Clayton Gathers, or does he look elsewhere for, some veteran leadership? And also, he's just the kind of player, much love and much respect for Clayton Gathers over his career. He's done whatever he's been asked to do. He got benched by a rookie. He got outplayed by a rookie. And what did he do? He accepted his role and he played special teams and he did exactly what he was supposed to do. And that's what you want out of your veterans. Guys that, they're happy for guys when they do well. They're not going to let their pride get away. Clayton Gathers, if there was like, a hierarchy of egos, think of some of the top divas in the NFL, the pyramid of divas, I guess I'll call it. Clayton Gathers would be completely at the bottom. Like, there's no doubt he would be a guy that has little to no ego. I mean, that's the kind of player that you want. You want a player like that. And I guess the debate will be talent versus leadership. And that's the big thing I'm going to be looking at. Do the Colts believe that Clayton Gathers probably won't be starting anytime soon unless an injury happens, knock on wood. But in an ideal world, Clayton Gathers probably isn't going to see the field much. He'll probably be on special teams. He'll probably just be in that backup role. Mm-hmm. But really, do you think that he can provide you something still? Or do you think he's really kind of, in terms of his play, he's probably not got a lot to offer you? And I think that's the debate that Chris Ballard is going to have in his head and with his staff is, do you bring back a guy like Gathers? Do you believe that he has a little bit more juice in the tank, or do you explore other options, say Eric Berry, one of those other veteran safeties on the market, to provide some leadership and provide some more safety depth? And so that's the debate that's going to happen. But I agree with you, Derek. I'm fine with whatever route the Colts go here. I'm not really emotionally tied together. Kahari Willis obviously is a starting safety moving forward. But if the Colts do get him at a good price, I'm totally okay if they bring him back for another year with, the mindset of he's not going to start at all. And that's totally okay with me. So, okay. So another guy we can kind of look at, he's a guy that's scheduled to be a free agent. He signed with the Colts this last year. He was one of two free agents the Colts signed last year. And he played in one game and got injured and was out for the entire year. And that's Devin Funchess. And he's a guy that was brought in to be a big body veteran. He's more of a veteran and a red zone threat for the Colts offense at that wide receiver core. And, he had a pretty solid first game. I mean, he had a couple catches. He got injured. He injured his clavicle kind of on a jump ball to the end zone in that Chargers game, that season opening game. He returned to practice. People were thinking, okay, he's going to come off of IR. And then things just didn't work out. And so Funchess just went back to injured reserve. Didn't see the field the rest of the year. But he got a decent contract from the Colts last year on a 1-year deal. And this is a guy that I'm kind of split on, honestly. It really depends on the price because he didn't really give you a lot last year, for obvious reasons, because he was injured. But, it's kind of like, do you bring him back for competition's sake? And also, on the flip side, does Devin Funchess even want to come back? Because when he signed with the Colts, he was under the stipulation that Andrew Luck is going to be the Colts starting quarterback for 16 games in 2019. And obviously that didn't happen at all. So is it something where Funchess is, is it something where he looks at that Colts quarterback position, he's like, oh my gosh, I don't want any part of a rookie quarterback throwing to me, Jacoby Brissett throwing to me, whatever it is, and I'm going to go try to find a team that I can win with now and a team that has an elite quarterback now. And that's just going to be the debate. But Derek, if you had the choice, if Devin Funchess wanted to come back, what would you say to re-signing him?
Yeah, you kind of mentioned it, how, he came here this last offseason under the impression that Andrew Luck was going to be the starter, and then obviously gets hurt week 1. And obviously he saw what came to be of the Indianapolis Colts. So you're right. It is a thing at this point where you wonder if Devin Funchess actually wants to be there versus what is he actually going to get. I mean, ultimately, Devin Funchess is not in a position to where he can really make any kind of demand for money. So his options are limited when it comes to what he's going to get, because obviously nobody's seen him play in 2 years. And, the Panthers got rid of him, and then he goes to the Colts, gets hurt the first game out, and then doesn't play the whole rest of the year. There's questions about, his dedication. So people are going to question him. I think ultimately his best bet at this point is to stay in Indianapolis, try it one more year, see what happens with whatever quarterback they have, and then make something work. Me personally, I would like to keep Funchess around because, again, we're kind of not in a situation where the Colts can really do much when it comes to wide receivers. But given so much emphasis on the wide receiver class this upcoming draft and seeing what, our options are, I definitely could see Devin Funchess being gone. So that way you have some room there, and then you bring in somebody in the second round, and then, you insert them into the system the same exact way you did Funchess.
For sure. The next two guys I want to look at, also wide receivers. I kind of look at them as kind of guys that didn't really make a huge impact in 2019. The first one being Chester Rogers. He didn't really do a lot. He only played in 12 games and went on injured reserve. He had knee injury, only had 16 catches. Really didn't do a lot for the Colts in 2019. And then also Dontrell Inman, a guy that was brought in 2018 when Andrew Luck was still here, and it was a revelation for the Colts, honestly, and really helped secure that number 2 wide receiver position, but then wasn't re-signed because the Colts obviously chose to sign Devin Funchess instead, but came back in week 15, had played 3 games with the Colts, finished out the season, only catching 4 passes for 49 yards. He's an older player and didn't do a lot for the Colts last year. And so both these guys are kind of guys that I probably wouldn't bring back, honestly. They're guys that I feel like you can definitely improve on. They're definitely guys that you could upgrade from. And, both guys have had stints with the Colts, and both guys have had, decent years at some point with the Colts. But both these guys I feel like are replaceable and don't really bring anything special to the table. And I definitely think that you could upgrade from both these guys. But I'm curious to hear your take on these two guys, Derek.
Yeah, like you said, not super interested in bringing these guys. Like you said, most of these guys are ending up being replaceable with that. Again, it's just one of those things. You mentioned it. I wouldn't be too hyped to try and bring either one of these guys back because, for obvious reasons.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, there's not a whole lot to say about those guys. It's like, they're okay. If you bring them back, whatever. Probably won't want them to make the final roster, but it's competition, whatever. Okay, so the next guys I'm going to look at, I'm actually going to clump these into. There's 3 guys here. I'm going to clump them into one category. They're the reserve offensive linemen from last year. First guy I have on the list, Josh Andrews, a center. He was the backup to Ryan Kelly. He played in that Pittsburgh game when Kelly went down. He played 49 offensive snaps at center for the Colts. He's been a decent backup, I guess, for you, but he's nothing special. I think a guy you can definitely improve on. Another guy, LaRaven Clark, who he only was active for 3 games in 2019. He was a 3rd-round pick in 2016 from Ryan Grigson, I should say, out of Texas Tech. He actually in 2018 he started the year when Costanza went down with an injury, and I thought he played pretty decent. But he's definitely a guy that you probably don't re-sign either. But the next guy I have is a guy that I would probably want the Colts to re-sign of all of these guys, and that's Joe Haeg. He's kind of that Swiss Army knife of the offensive line. He doesn't, he's not a guy that's going to probably start games for you, and he might actually, if he does leave, he might leave because he wants starter money, because I feel like he's the guy that could start on a team. But he's the guy that's played tackle, he's played guard. I think he's played pretty much everything except for center at this point. And he played for Quentin Nelson in week 16. He was a 5th-round pick, so he's in that same class as Clark. But I feel like he's a guy that's, proved to be the better player in these couple of years that he's been with the Colts. But his contract's obviously up as well. So I'm curious, Derek, on these 3 guys, kind of where do you stand on Andrews, on Clark, and then on Haeg?
Yeah, Clark obviously is a no return for me. Hasn't had much time and just really hasn't done much to prove himself since coming to the team a few years ago. Was a guy that, you hoped that he would get better. He had good size for the position that he was playing, but just, didn't quite learn how to read schemes and was just not really strong given his size. So yeah, he's definitely a no bring back for me. And then Josh Andrews, obviously this year with the few injuries to Ryan Kelly in the middle of the year. Ryan Kelly in the middle of the year. Andrews had a few times to play where he actually played, 49 snaps against Pittsburgh. And that was, the game that he pretty much had his most playing time. Had a couple plays where he actually looked like he was actually doing pretty good. I'm indifferent when it comes to him. I just don't know if I would be personally willing to bring him back. But I think you might have to, just simply off of this, that Joe Haeg, as much as I want to bring him back, I don't know if he's willing to come back, because I feel that there is a team out there somewhere that is going to look at Haeg and willing to pay him good dollars to ensure he comes to play for them. And that scares me, because obviously Haeg is a really great secondary piece in case something unfortunately were to happen to one of our offensive linemen. He's always been, like you said, the Swiss Army knife. Has been able to play just about every position outside of center for the most part. And, he's done particularly well in those limited snaps that he gets. So, yeah, it does concern me that somebody's going to want to see Haeg in a regular starting uniform somewhere else. But if Haeg is willing to stay, I am willing to pay a decent dollar to make sure that he stays in Indianapolis.
Yeah, and I think it's fairly obvious that the Colts have to get some more depth in that offensive line. And whether you do it with Joe Haeg and Josh Andrews and what have you, or you don't, the Colts still have to upgrade that interior. I think that's just like non-negotiable at this point. They were so fortunate last year to really not have any significant injuries among that offensive line. But I think they have to, and whether or not you bring back some of these guys is to be determined. But out of all those guys, I would definitely bring back Joe Haeg if the price is right and if he's willing to stay in Indianapolis as a reserve. And so Another guy, another kind of bigger name as well, Jabal Sheard, defensive end. He's the guy that last year, actually, he's been pretty durable for the Colts ever since he was brought in 2017 by Chris Ballard. He was a guy who last year kind of was hit with the injury bug to start the year. He got injured in training camp and was out the first couple weeks of 2019. And he played in 13 games for the Colts. He had, just typical Jabal Sheard numbers. Honestly, nothing spectacular, but, pretty solid numbers. And that's just kind of the player that he is, very good run defender, and he kind of makes up for that with not being a fantastic off-the-edge player. But, he's a 9-year NFL veteran. He's a key piece and a key cog to that defense. But he's getting older. He's, I believe he's 30 or over 30 now. And so he's a guy that's played some good snaps for the Colts in the couple of years he's been here, but his contract extension's up. And so I guess the question is, do you bring back Sheard, or do you try to break the bank and, sign one of those big name free agents or draft an edge guy or whatever it is and choose not to bring Sheard back? I'm of the thinking that you do bring Sheard back just because I think he offers you a lot in the running against the run. And some of those younger guys the Colts have, Kamoko Toure, Ben Banogu, aren't necessarily that good against the run, at least at this point in their careers. And so I think you should bring him back and kind of bring him back just for depth purposes. And then if you want to address that edge rusher, I think you can do that in free agency still. And I think you can do that in the draft. But I would just bring back a guy like Sheard because I think he just offers you a lot. And I don't think I would sign him to a big deal, multi-year deal, but I think he's a guy that you can bring back for a couple of years. He can still give you a couple of years of pretty solid football. But what would you do, Derek, with Jabal Sheard?
Yeah, if the Colts don't have somebody in the mix right away to be that defensive end, then I would absolutely want to bring Jabal Sheard back for the obvious reasons. Like you said, he's a phenomenal run defending end, which is something that is not really, talked about as much as, pressuring the quarterback. But even though Jabal Sheard has had a few sacks every year when he gets out there, he's also one of those guys that, like you said, he leads by example, isn't much of a guy to talk. He's more of a just let me go out and do my thing and just watch kind of guy, which is another guy that you want to have in that locker room as well. And yeah, he's his production every year. He's reliable. He's good productive wise. I would definitely want to make sure that we keep Jabal Sheard if we can get him for a good price.
For sure. Another guy that I might potentially want to bring back, depending on what the price is Jonathan Williams. He's a guy that last year he played in 9 games. He actually started 1 game for the Colts last year. Had 235 yards. He had a touchdown. And the big thing is, in those weeks that Marlon Mack was injured in weeks 11 and 12, he had back-to-back 100-yard rushing performances. And he's a player that's kind of been on the Colts practice squad in 2018 fully, and then he's a 4th running back right now. And so he wasn't really a guy that you think much about, but when he was called upon, he performed and he produced. And I think that's something that's big. I guess it really depends on, is he want to be the number 4 running back here with the Colts? And also, what's he going to command for the Colts? Is he going to command? Is he going to think, because of those performances, I want to go somewhere else where I can kind of let my talent shine and get more playing time? Or is he a guy that's comfortable with where he is on the Colts and grateful for an opportunity, and the guy that the Colts bring back? I personally am of the belief that in a 16-game season, you're going to have wear and tear like we've seen. You're going to have probably one of your running backs, if not multiple of your running backs, get injured. And I think you just have to have depth at that position. Now, if he commands a lot of money, I'm fully of the belief that you can also draft a running back, in the later rounds. And we saw that with Marlon Mack, 4th-round pick. Jordan Wilkins, 5th-round pick. Naheem Hines, 4th-round picks. All the Colts picks have been 4th round or later. And Jonathan Williams obviously is a guy that the Colts did not draft, but they brought in. And he's, he played pretty well, all things considered. So I would probably bring him back if the price is right. What would you do, Derek, with Jonathan Williams?
Yeah, Jonathan Williams, again, for, when we were dealing with Marlon Mack having issues, Jonathan Williams did provide a good relief out of the backfield. Pretty much any running back can do some good with that kind of offensive line and the way that the Colts are able to run the ball. I mean, unless he's asking for a small amount, I'm not really of the interest of bringing Jonathan Williams back just because, again, it's one of those things. He's a third string running back at best. And I just don't feel the need to put too much emphasis on him unless he doesn't feel he has any other options anywhere.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. That's a good point you bring up there. The last guy on my list, this is going to be more of a controversial one, Adam Vinatieri, a guy that has been with the Colts since 2006, has been fantastic. He's the GOAT as far as kickers go. He's the leading scorer of the entire league. But last year he had a rough year. He played in 12 games, 17 to 25 field goals. That's not very good, but the thing that was the worst was he missed 6 extra points. He was only 78.6% good on those, and he got placed on injured reserve. And, he's a guy that the Colts have said is going to try to rehab and see where he's at and kind of see, for playing in 2019 and beyond, kind of where he's feeling. This is a tough one for me, man. It's like, how do you go against the greatest kicker of all time, the most clutch kicker of all time? How do you say no to bringing him back? But I think I got to say no to bringing him back, because of the age, because of the injury, and those things factor into each other because as you get older with age, man, like those injuries, you can't recover from them as quick. And it seems like this has been an injury that Adam Vinatieri has dealt with for a while now. It's been a lingering injury for him. It's a groin injury, I believe. And so I liked what Chase McLaughlin did. I believe that you can bring in younger guys that can produce some competition. It's just so tough for me to bring him back after that atrocious season he had last year where he cost the Colts games. Like he cost the Colts games that they could have won. And again, I get it. It's the NFL. There are 1,000 other factors for why the Colts lost the games that they did. But kicking was a big part of why they lost. Even that not the home opener. I mean, I guess you could kind of call it the home opener. I mean, the Chargers didn't really have many fans there. Heck, the Colts probably outnumbered them there in Los Angeles. But anyway, he cost the Colts, I believe it was like a lot of points, maybe even double-digit points there with the missed field goals and missed extra points. And,
I mean, he cost us, 7 points in the first game alone?
Yeah.
It was 7 points in the first game alone. I mean, he single-handedly cost us that first game.
Right. And I get it. People will probably be in the comment section saying, why are you attacking Adam Vinatieri? It's a team game. I get that. But when you're hurting your team, something's got to change. And I just think, I'm of the belief, I love what Adam Vinatieri's done. I'm so thankful for what Adam Vinatieri has done. Heck, he's been the Colts kicker ever since I've watched them and paid attention to them. Adam Vinatieri has been the Colts kicker. But I'm just of the belief, man, that you can get younger at that position. You have a guy that looked really, really good in Chase McLaughlin. He was a rookie last year, so he's very young. Guy with a lot of potential there, and you can even bring in more competition there at that kicker position. But, in a league of instability, I think the Colts got one of the better kickers in Chase McLaughlin, one of the better younger kickers, I should say, in Chase McLaughlin, based off of what we saw, not just with the Colts, but throughout his 2019 season. He was solid. He was good for all those teams he was on, and the Colts have him now. And so I'm going to say no to Vinatieri. I know that's probably a little bit controversial maybe, but I want to hear your take on it, Derek.
Well, it may be controversial for some people, but it's not controversial for me, Cody. I'm in the same boat with you. Do not bring Adam Vinatieri. Or I guess I shouldn't say don't bring him back. I guess I shouldn't say don't bring him back. It's just the issue of, like you said again, he's 40, he's his mid 40s, and the injuries have been stacking up. And like I said, he cost us several games last year. He wasn't the sole reason why we got cost so many games last year, but there were multiple games that he had a ginormous factor in why we either barely won or didn't win. And, you have the Chargers game, you had the Broncos game, and a couple others that I can't name off the top of my head. But, I feel like I'm Zach Hicks right now, just like, just abolish the kickers. The kickers suck. It's just one of those things that, I could only imagine if Zach listens to this, the reaction he's getting. I could only imagine what he would be saying in his head.
I agree. Holy crap. Okay, so wow, I didn't realize how much older Adam Vinatieri is. 13 years older than Rams coach Sean McVay. Now I get Sean McVay's young, but that's crazy. He's still playing, and he's
it is really old. And that's why I would just say, look, just move on. Thank him for everything he did. He's probably going to get into the Colts Ring of Honor at some point, which is really cool. I mean, not everybody that ends their careers in Indianapolis has to end on a great positive note. We'll remember Vinatieri a lot more for the multitude of years that he was there helping us win games. And he certainly helped us win a few games last year as well. So, look, you take the bad with the good with the bad, go live your life, have a good one. It's just time to move into a different direction with that.
Yeah, I just think it would be irresponsible to try that again. I really do. I think that it's something where he cost you so many games last year. I get it to a point where Frank Reich's like, how do you cut the best player of all time? But the NFL is a business. And with any business, if I showed up to my job, again, I get it. I'm not in my career. I'm not the best to ever do it like Adam Vinatieri is, but say you show up to your job, you've been doing your job a long time, and you can no longer function. You can no longer do the duties that you have to do. It's a business. Like, it does. Like, thank you for your service and what you've done, but we got to go. We're not about sentimental things. We're not about looking at the past. If you're the Colts, we're about winning football games. We're about winning the Super Bowl. And if your kicker can't do that, if he can't live up to par. And Adam Vinatieri even said it. He said, I will retire when I feel like I was a hindrance to my team. Well, it's not really breaking news, but Adam Vinatieri was a hindrance to his team last year. And so, regardless of if he thinks he can continue to kick, I think the Colts have to be smart with this. They have to take their feelings, throw them out at this point, and they have to make a business decision because it's the NFL. And that's just my take on it. Right. I mean, somebody's probably going to comment something nasty in the comment section, but man, that's just how it is. That's just how kind of business runs. And so that's just my take on it. We can move on now to the restricted free agents, unless you have any more comments, Derek, on Vinatieri. Anything else you want to add?
Nope, I'm good there.
All right. So what a restricted free agent is basically a player whose contract has expired and has fewer than 4 tenured years in the league. So basically it's a player who's probably a little bit younger. He may sign an offer sheet with any other team, but his original team has 7 days to match any offer he receives. If the original team does not match the offer, compensation will be awarded in the form of draft picks from the signing team. The round and quantity of picks that are determined by the qualifying offer made by the player's original team. If a restricted free agent is tendered a minimum qualifying offer, the compensation is equivalent of the round in which the player was originally selected. So if that player was originally a rookie free agent, no compensation is awarded. And so the Colts only have a couple of these guys. I believe that the one that would maybe qualify would be Marcus Johnson. I believe he was like a 6th-round pick or something like that. He's the first guy we can kind of talk about. He's a guy that, was kind of on the Colts practice squad. And when all the Colts had all those injuries to their wide receivers, he got activated from that practice squad, played in 8 games, started 6 games. He finished with 17 catches, 277 yards, 2 touchdowns. He's a guy that the Colts did not pick up his whatever you call it. They're not going to offer him anything, so he will become a free agent. He'll be a guy that can sign anywhere. But, he provided some stuff for you last year. But ultimately, Derek, why do you think the Colts decided that they're probably not going to bring him back and they're going to let him test free agency in 2020 and moving forward?
Yeah, like you said, the wide receiver thing, it's so weird with the Colts, right? We have this discussion probably we have probably had this discussion every offseason over the last 5 years, has been, that sixth or seventh wide receiver, who's going to come in, make sure to check this out and this guy out. But, it's just one of those things that, again, or we're going to come into this draft and we're going to probably get some guys. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Marcus Johnson go. And, we always appreciate Marcus Johnson for what he does, but I mean, he's just another guy that comes and goes with us, and we just may not have the roster spot for him.
Yeah, I think it's ultimately just that. You want to improve on that wide receiver position. You're probably going to address it in the draft. Maybe you'll do it in free agency, and there's just not room for him on the roster, and I think that's fair. Another guy that was brought in, kind of signed off the practice squad actually in October, was Trayvon Coley. He was actually signed from the Ravens practice squad. He played in 7 games. He had 6 tackles. He's a guy that hasn't really done much in his career. He was kind of just a rotational piece among that defensive line, a bigger body in there. And so I don't know how much, Derek, you know about Coley, but he's probably, I don't know if you would bring him back or not, especially kind of how bare that defensive line position is right now. Would you consider bringing back a guy like Trayvon Coley?
I probably wouldn't do that right now, just with the D line the way it is. I like who we have in there in the mix now, with the Grover Stewart's in the middle and the Kamiko Toure and Ben Benegu on the outside. I'm just not, I didn't see much of Coley over the last year. And I just think that that's just another position that Ballard will try to look at in the draft. I just don't see that happening.
Yeah, I think he's going to address that defensive tackle position, free agency, and or the draft. So I agree with you there. Another guy, a corner, kind of a crowded position. I'm not going to try to say his first name. I think it's Brian, but I don't want to mess it up. But we'll just say Brian for the sake of argument. Brian Body Calhoun. That's an interesting name. But he's a corner. He played in 2 games. He started actually one for the Colts in 2019. He didn't really do a whole lot. He had 1 sack, quarterback hit. He's a 4-year veteran. He's kind of been around the league. Started 22 games. He played for Cleveland. He played for Houston, and then he came to the Colts. Kind of just a rotational piece back there. But would you bring him back just for depth purposes and then, just in training camp and stuff, just for more competition, or would you not?
Yeah, I mean, that's the great thing with, training camp and other things like that. You want to bring guys in to try and get some more competition. So, yeah, like you said, with the right price being in mind and with the competition factor, it's always a good idea to bring in some extra guys to help push those other ones.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, we can move on now to the exclusive right free agents. So basically, these are players whose contracts have expired and have two or fewer tenured years in the league. The Colts must make a contract offer by the league-imposed deadline, or the players become unrestricted free agents. The first guy on our list was a big talking point in training camp before he really suffered that gruesome ankle injury late in training camp, and that's Jerese Fountain. He's a guy that played pretty much his entire rookie season on the Colts practice squad. And, he really wasn't doing a whole lot in that first year. And then when it came training camp, he started making a lot of plays, started making a big push for that 53-man roster. And then obviously he had that ankle injury, went down in training camp, missed the entire 2019 season. With a 5th-round pick in 2018, he hasn't done a lot in the league because obviously practice squad and then being injured. But he's a guy I think I would be interested to bring back, especially considering – we didn't really see him in game action as far as live bullets. I mean, you can count the preseason kind of. He was making some plays in the preseason, but as far as a regular season game, we haven't really seen him. We saw him in that Kansas City game, but in that playoff game a couple of years ago, but we haven't really seen him just because of circumstances. But he's a guy that has tremendous potential. He's a guy that looked like, at least from what we saw, he definitely progressed as a wide receiver in the NFL. He's a guy that I would be interested. I think you should definitely bring back and kind of see what you can tap into with Jerese Fountain now that he's entering his 3rd year, especially since you obviously cut ties with Deion Kane and, let him go. I think he's with the Steelers now. And I think he's just a guy he's a really intriguing guy that I'm definitely going to be watching this year and this summer when I go down to training camp and just kind of see this new revamped, potentially Colts wide receiver position. What would you say, Derek, to bringing back Reese Fountain?
Yeah, I'm absolutely in favor of bringing back Reese Fountain. Obviously, we saw what he was doing in training camp before going down with that injury. A guy that plays with a lot of passion. Anyone that follows him on Twitter knows that. It certainly looks like he really wants to get back onto the football field. Hopefully, we can go through training camp again without him having an issue. I think he's going to put in the time and the effort to get himself right again and to be able to make a difference. And, again, like I said, with the wide receivers that we have, it certainly wouldn't be a terrible option to see if he's going to try and stick around. I think he wants to be around here, and I certainly would like to really bring him back.
Yeah, something cool. Reese Fountain posted actually on the 8th. So he posted a couple days ago from when we're recording. Now we're recording on the 10th. So I guess yesterday was the first day that he worked out without, he said, my training wheels on. He said, we're not fully there yet, but it's been a long time coming. So looks like he's doing well in his recovery process. He's definitely an interesting prospect to bring back, a guy that I would absolutely bring back. I'm the last guy on the list here, Roland Milligan. He's a guy that he played a significant role with the Colts there in 2019. Played in 11 games. He started a game. He finished with 10 tackles, a quarterback hit. He played some special teams. Went on injured reserve with a foot injury December 18th. Potentially a guy that you bring back for competition's sake, especially if you let Clayton Geathers walk and you don't really address that safety position in free agency. A young guy that, potentially you could tap into. He kind of gives me, obviously it may not even pan out to this, kind of gives me a little bit of Kenny Moore vibes. A guy that kind of got some playing time when some injuries happened, played pretty decent, a guy that he's young, a guy that you can potentially bring back and see some potential in. What do you think about bringing Milligan back potentially for the Colts in 2020?
Yeah, Mulligan's definitely a guy that, is a good role player, especially for special teams. And anyone that knows Chris Ballard knows that if you're able to play special teams while also playing another position, you are certainly a guy that he is looking forward to keep around. So I am perfectly willing to say that I would want to have Mulligan back, especially if we're going to be able to keep him on a lower deal as well.
For sure. He's kind of a guy that is, in my mind, kind of polar opposites of Quincy Wilson at this point. Quincy Wilson, early round pick, can't play special teams. Milligan, a guy who I believe he was undrafted or a late draft pick. He's a guy that can play special teams, can kind of play whatever you want. And so I would definitely consider bringing him back. I think he's a good potential option, especially like I talked about, same philosophy with running backs and defensive backs. It's a long season. You need depth, and I think Milligan can provide that depth and also can grow as a player because, he doesn't have a lot of NFL experience yet. I think he can continue to develop, continue to grow as a player, and can be a guy that you can bring back and kind of see if you can tap into any potential there. Okay, and moving on to our next segment here. So yesterday we posted our top 5 positions of need. Derek posted his, I posted mine. What we thought, we kind of had a little bit of different opinion on it. So I wanted to kind of start and look at my top 5 positions of need here, and then I'll pass it off to you, Derek, after I am done defending why I believe my list is accurate, and then I'll have you do the same for yours. So I'll start here at number 5, and I have cornerback. Now, I know the Colts addressed this last year in the draft. Their first pick in the second round was a corner, Rock Ya-Sin. But I believe that you can definitely, we saw some good things as the season progressed with Ya-Sin. But I believe that you can upgrade over Pierre Desir. I believe that you can get some quality options there at corner. I don't anticipate you taking it in the first couple rounds. But I think that that's a position that you can potentially continue to upgrade, especially with the uncertainty around Quincy Wilson coming into this year. Does he even make the final roster? I think it's a position that you could address, whether that be free agency and you bring in some more competition. I know a lot of people have thought about Byron Jones. He might cost a lot, so you have to weigh that option. But I think one thing the Colts have been lacking is a true number one corner. We've seen flashes of it from different players, but nobody has taken it and solidified it. So I think you can definitely upgrade there. I only have it at 5 because I believe that if you don't really upgrade it this offseason, it's not the end of the world. I believe it's something that you should upgrade, but if you don't, I know you have other needs that you need to address. So if you put a lot of that investment in those other positions, I won't be mad. I think you can get away with it. You have some depth there at that corner position. So number 5 for me there is corner. Number 4 for me is tight end. I believe tight end is a huge thing this offseason is for how the Colts offense goes. We touched on it earlier. Eric Ebron's not coming back to the Colts, most likely. He's going to be exploring other options. The Colts have, outside of Ebron, the Colts have Jack Doyle, who has been a solid player, but he's not really a player that's going to take the top off a defense. And they have Mo Alley-Cox, who's more of just a run blocker at this point. And I believe that the Colts really need to address the tight end position and find a receiving threat similar to Eric Ebron, a red zone threat for whoever the quarterback is in 2020. They just need to address it. They need to upgrade there. They need to find a young player, a young, good receiving threat, maybe a guy that you don't necessarily have to have come in and block, kind of how they used Eric Ebron. But I believe they need a complement to Jack Doyle. I believe they should probably either find one of those two guys we talked about in free agency, one of those receiving tight ends, or go mid-round pick, get a tight end. That's kind of my take on it. For me, number 3 is wide receiver. I believe wide receiver is huge this offseason. Similar to corner, though, the Colts addressed it last year, but a little bit different from corner is they didn't get the production out of Paris Campbell that they got out of Rock Ya-Sin. I mean, Paris Campbell showed some flashes, but he was injured a lot in that first year. And so, Zach Pascal kind of showed you something. So you think you got some good potential young players in both those guys. If you bring back Devin Funchess, that's obviously a move that's going to be interesting to see. T.Y. Hilton's getting up there in age. He's been injured the last couple years. And, you also, you have some other potential players that you could continue to look at. But I think you should address the wide receiver position, whether that be free agency. Say the Cowboys let Amari Cooper walk for some stupid reason. I think you go after him. Or you go in the draft and you bring back you bring a guy in second round, third round. You double dip in the draft and get a couple guys there. Just really increase the talent level and really increase the competition at that wide receiver position for whoever the starting quarterback is. So I have it there at number 3 because there are some guys that you can work with, but I think you still have to continue to upgrade and pour some resources into it in this offseason. Number 2 for me is defensive tackle, primarily the 3 technique. I think Grover Stewart's a fine player. I think he can play there at the other defensive tackle position, but you got to address that 3 technique. Danico Autry came in last year with high expectations, at least from me. Didn't do hardly anything. 3.5 sacks. Was not near the impact pass rusher he was in 2018. He's getting up there in age as well, so I think you need to address that, whether that be free agency. You have a guy like Eric Armstead. Do you potentially, if the 49ers don't re-sign him, sign him to play that 3 technique for you? He's a young player. Or do you draft a guy? I kind of have a new draft crush, and we'll talk about this later on in our second mock draft, but I kind of have a draft crush in Ross Blacklock, defensive tackle. I think the Colts could get him in the second round there. But, Derek's talked about it before. Javon Kinlaw, guy there at 13. If all those quarterback prospects are gone, do you sign or do you draft Kinlaw? A very disruptive defensive tackle in there. There's a lot of ways that you can approach it, but I think you simply need to address it and you simply need to upgrade from it in 2020. So, and that obviously leaves number 1. Shouldn't be a shock to anybody. I've been preaching it all offseason. Number 1 is quarterback. It's undoubtedly quarterback. I mean, there's a big gap for me. And I believe that Jacoby Brissett's a fine backup, but he's not the player that you are going to move forward with in the future for the Colts at the quarterback position. I know the Colts, at least on paper, at least from what they've said, believe in Jacoby Brissett, but I believe that you simply need to upgrade the talent there. I believe, Jacoby Brissett's not particularly a super young player anymore. I believe he's 27 now. So he's getting older, and he really hasn't shown a ton of signs of improvement. I mean, he's a fine backup, but I think that's all he should be for you. And so I would definitely address the quarterback position. We've talked about this time and time again. We'll continue to talk about it time and time again. You got to upgrade. You got to upgrade, whether that's free agency and you bring in one of these guys, you trade for a guy, or, potentially you draft a guy there at 13, or you trade up for a guy. If you really fall in love with the guy, kind of like the Chiefs did with Patrick Mahomes. Hopefully it's more of a Patrick Mahomes than a Mitchell Trubisky situation. But regardless, you got to do something there to upgrade that position, because Frank Reich talked about it, and I think Chris Ballard talked about it. It's the most important position and probably the hardest position in sports to play. So you have to have a superstar at that position, or a very, very good player at that position, to be successful in this league. And we saw it in the Super Bowl, Derek. When it came time to make a play, the best player on the field made a play, and that was Patrick Mahomes, the Chiefs quarterback. So that's my list. I'll run through it again. 5 corner, 4 tight end, 3 wide receiver, 2 defensive tackle, and number 1 is quarterback. That's my list, and that's why I think it's accurate. But Derek, you have a little bit of different list. What's your list?
Yes. And before I even get anywhere into this list, and I'm talking to the audience right here, you, I can see you through your laptop or mobile device, whatever you're listening to this on, before you type that comment. And I know what comment you're just about to type. It's that reference that Cody just made about, let's hope it's a Patrick Mahomes situation, not a Mitchell Trubisky situation. Don't you dare start typing in that that's the reason why we should go with Jordan Love over Justin Herbert. Don't you do it. All right? You're listening to me now. Don't do it, because I'll get mad at you. Anyway, I'm just kidding, Colts Nation. I love you guys. But anyway, everybody knows my guy is Justin Herbert. But anyway, so yeah, my list for my top 5 biggest needs for this Colts offseason. Number 5 is tight end for me. Tight end, obviously, a bigger one now that we're missing Eric Ebron. And with uncertainty of the depth of the rest of the guys that we have, we know we're going to have Jack Doyle, who is a consistent, good tight end. But it's always important to have another, especially one that can receive. And that would be great to add to the team as well. And number 4 for me is offensive guard, somebody to complement that right side. I know that many people would say what tight end is more important than that. Yeah, but it's kind of funny that I'm the one that is taking a note out of Cody's book here and wanting offensive guard ahead of tight end, because, this is the same guy that was preaching to me all year. We got to upgrade over Glowinski. I mean, it's just has to happen. And I'm kind of agreeing with him here. I would love to be able to bring somebody in that could compete with Glowinski for that right guard spot, especially since, we just talked about it earlier with, Joe Haig possibly going to another team, not getting Josh Andrews back, maybe. The lack of depth on the offensive line, it's something that we absolutely can use. So offensive guard for me at number 4. Number 3 for me, and I think this is the same for you, Cody, is wide receiver at number 3. Like I said, obviously we still need some bigger talent on that wide receiver group. I just am tired of hearing a lot of people say that, keep talking about lack of production from our wide receivers. You even have players from the Colts saying the reason why there was no production is because they were hurt all year. I mean, that you're not listening when your own team is telling you, reminding you that the wide receivers were hurt all year. There's a reason why they weren't producing. So again, they need somebody new, somebody that's going to come in, be that new an improved wide receiver. And obviously Paris Campbell being in there, obviously he's going to help out. And with T.Y. Hilton on the back end of what we think is the back end of his career here soon, and the uncertainty of Devin Funchess and a few other guys, it makes sense that they would want to go with a wide receiver or two in this draft. Now, this is where it gets interesting for me. And I can already hear the comments now. I've already been battling with some people on Twitter about it, but I'm going to say it. The number two biggest need we have is our quarterback. Not number one. You heard me right, folks. It's quarterback at number 2. Okay, so
our comment section.
here's why I say that. So, and I'll explain more on the reason this number 1 position is more important here in a second. But I'm just going to say this, that there are a lot of options that I can see happening for the Colts when it comes to quarterbacks in this offseason. You do have the possibility of getting a Rivers, which, as much as some people say he's not a good player, I think most can agree he's a slight upgrade from Jacoby Brissett. Or if you would decide to get Tom Brady, or you'd go for a Jameis Winston, or a Teddy Bridgewater, or an Andy Dalton, or Nick Foles, or any of these guys, Derek Carr. I think that there are multiple options, and not to mention, if what is said is true, that the Colts are really thinking about getting a quarterback, then they would probably already know who they're trying to go after. I'm just thinking that there are a plethora of options at quarterback that, at least for a year, this team can slightly improve on, even if they decide to keep Jacoby Brissett in the mix. It's just going to be a thing of which one, and does that help? I think that it's ultimately just not as huge of an issue as some people make it out to be, at least not at this moment. And the number 1 position that I think is the biggest of needs for the Indianapolis Colts is the defensive tackle. Now, our best pass rusher at defensive tackle, Danico Autry, 9 sacks in 2018, only 3.5 sacks in 2019. Very disappointing season. Our second best defensive tackle was Grover Stewart with 3 sacks, and he was a backup. And
he's not supposed to rush the passer.
And he's not supposed to rush the passer. That is truth. And Margus Hunt, who, we kept around for 2 more years, he didn't get a sack. Not one, all year long. The top 3 guys on our defensive line and in the middle accumulated for 6.5 sacks. 3 guys. That's not good. That's not good at all. And it's no secret the Colts gave up a lot of rushing yards throughout the year. When it came to that, they're also looking for better guys in the middle. I've always been on the big side of, possibly getting a Derek Brown or a Javon Kinlaw or guys like that in the beginning of this draft that are playmakers. They are designed for this. They got the long arms, the really powerful bodies. They're big. They just move people. They're Grover Stewart, but more athletic, basically, is what that is. So, and I've always said it. If there's one thing that's not more important, it's the 3 most important things in football. It's getting a quarterback, getting a line to protect your quarterback, and then putting guys on the line to go after the opposing team's quarterback. Defensive tackle and the defensive line is very important. And we're starting to get the understanding of that from the defensive ends. Our defensive ends performed pretty well last year, given the circumstances, obviously with a bunch of our guys getting hurt early in the year, and Justin Houston came along, had 11 sacks. Kamiko Toure was off to a great start at the beginning of the year before he got hurt as well. So I think we need that middle to ensure that that rush up the middle is not going anywhere, and to ensure that we're able to get to the quarterback by pushing him backwards. That's what we need more than anything. And that's why I really think that defensive tackle is the biggest need for us at this moment. So with my top five, again, number 5, tight end, number 4, offensive guard, number 3, wide receiver, number 2, quarterback, number 1, defensive tackle.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't really – there was like one position. I had corner, you had offensive guard, but I mean, we had pretty much all the same positions except for that one. But we just kind of had them in a little bit different order. But, they're all needs. They're all positions the Colts need to address. Regardless of what we think our opinion is on where and the level of importance the Colts should place on these positions, it doesn't matter. But the facts are the Colts need to address these positions because these were weaknesses. These were reasons why the Colts did not make the playoffs, did not have a winning season, and there was just a lot of factors into that. And so these are some of the positions that we believe the Colts need to address. But, our 1 and 2, just flip-flop those, and we're there. You obviously have the mindset you win games. You're more of a you win games by getting after the quarterback, which I totally understand. I'm more of you win games with, yes, getting after the quarterback, but also have an elite quarterback. I think we're on the same level there. I just place a little bit more on the quarterback position, and you place a little bit more on the 3 technique, and that's totally cool. But we'd love to hear what you guys think on the top 5 positions for the Colts. And also, who do you think the Colts are going to bring back in unrestricted and restricted and all those different things in free agency? What do you think the Colts are going to do? What do you think the Colts should do? It'll be interesting to see kind of how our predictions play out here as free agency starts next Wednesday, and also as the draft approaches here in the month of April, coming up pretty quickly. I believe it's the last weekend, the last Thursday, Friday, Saturday of April. So coming up here, man, a little over a month, but it's exciting. So pumped just for stuff to start going again. I tell you what, the draft is like my favorite time of the year because it's like that entire weekend. I guess that Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, I texted my girlfriend and said, hey, you're probably not going to see me because I'm going to be watching the draft like all day. And it's just like a holiday, man. It really is. It's so much fun. I love to do it. And have you seen what they're doing this year for the draft? It's pretty sweet, actually.
Yeah, I saw, the scene of how they're doing it with how they're going to get everybody, moving like that. Yeah, it is pretty cool. It's going to be a change of scenery. It's a little different than, what we're used to. It's just kind of one of those things we're just going to have to watch, see how the NFL prepares this, and then we'll just have to see. I certainly hope that, this coronavirus bull crap doesn't impact the draft at all. I'd highly doubt it just because, it's not like I don't know how they're going to do the seating and everything. I'm not sure how that's going to work. I know that, a bunch of sports leagues are basically going around saying, that we're limiting access to, locker rooms now to essential personnel. I just don't know how that's going to work for the draft and everything. I'm just hoping that at some point here in the next few weeks, this stuff will die down a little bit and then people just kind of not panic as much.
Yeah, my parents and a couple of my siblings were planning on going on a cruise, actually. And now, obviously, with the coronavirus and all that stuff, and my sister got injured in basketball, and so she's in a boot. They just kind of decided, no, we're not going to go this year. And actually, they got an email from the cruise line that basically said, hey, we know obviously this is a concern. You're able to kind of cancel this year. And you're able to go, I believe, through 2021. So they have the next couple of years if they want to take that cruise still. And so, but yeah, man, it's definitely an issue. Hopefully it doesn't last until the draft. Hopefully it's kind of over by that point and we can just move on. But, in the case that it's not, man, let's move it to Indianapolis. I'm all for it. Let's move it to Indy.
Yeah,
that would be fantastic. That would be so cool.
Hey, I'd be down. My friends and I have already decided that we're going to go to the draft in Cleveland in 2021.
Okay. Do you think Indianapolis will ever get it? Ever get a bid there for it?
I think they will. I honestly think they will, just with how nice the city is, and how many events they already host. It makes sense that they would want to bring it to Indianapolis at some point. Yeah.
I mean, some people are trying to push the combine out of Indianapolis. So
I know that, which is stupid.
So dumb. I don't know why they think that's a good idea. Moving it to Indianapolis, for me, it's a good sized city. Like it's perfect for the combine because it's not too big. It's not too crowded. It's just perfect. Like you can get around. Everything's convenient. But if you go to like LA, you go to New York, you go to one of those West Coast cities, it's just going to be I just don't think it's going to be good. I think Indianapolis is perfect for it. And I think that they should stop trying to move everything out west, and they should just let Indianapolis have the combine because they do an excellent job year in and year out. It's kind of like, why would you try to fix something that's not broken? It doesn't make any sense. Work on fixing your officials. Work on fixing your stupid rules. Don't work on these little stupid things that are working. It's just like silly. So stupid sometimes, and I'm just like, what is the board even trying to do here? What's the NFLPA? What is all this stuff doing? It's like just fix the things that are obviously wrong and stop trying to move things around that are working. I don't know. That's just my little rant there, but yeah, man, I think that wraps up this podcast. It was a good one. Definitely a little bit longer than we usually do, but I love it, man. The draft's coming up soon. I think we'll probably – actually, I don't think we'll be able to unless we record sometime this week because I'm going to actually be out of town. I'm going to be going down south, hopefully. Don't come back with a coronavirus, but going down south. My grandparents have they rent a condo down south in Florida, and so a couple of my buddies and I were going down there and staying with them for a week. Much needed. It's been a while since I've been able to go down there, so super excited for that. And I'm just always excited because I'll be enjoying that while also watching free agency frenzy happen at the same time. So I'm super pumped for that. Super pumped for just the NFL to get back into swing a little bit. It's been a little bit of a lull, and now I'm ready, man, for more action and more fun stuff coming up and more drama. It's going to be great. Love it. And yeah, so I think that wraps up our podcast here. Thanks, guys, for listening. We appreciate your support as always. And as always, go Colts.